Oh, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I think we can go ahead and get started. Okay, great. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the weekly Argo City Enroll Contributor meeting. I'm your host for today. So let's get started with our typical agenda. So first, primary and secondary last week, it looks like were Dan and Alexander. Uh, and it does look like you had at least two topics. Feel free to take it away.
Yeah, I had those. They're somewhat related. It's the user that wants to use a proxy for customized operations. So I think they connect to GitHub repos when they're doing their customized build and they need the proxy setup configured. And right now they need to set that proxy on the repo server, if I'm not mistaken. But in Helm, there's a feature where you can specify, I think, the proxy values in the application. So they'd like to do the same thing with customize, but I haven't used proxy at all. So I wanted to have your guys' opinion on uh, whether you think it's a good idea to add this or not. I think it looks like a valid use case, and if it's already in Helm, and if someone has knowledge of how it's done in Elm, maybe just
Yeah, I agree. This sounds like a valid feature. But I'll defer to some of the folks that maybe have more knowledge about the Helm implementation as you described. Um, folks that are more versed in the security concerns around this. Um, Anybody else have thoughts um, about these two issues?
Also, the users seemed like they were interested to implement it themselves. So I think I'll, I'll just let them know in the issues that they can start the implementation if we all think it's a good idea.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll take silence as no objection. So, yeah, I would say that they can go ahead and work on implementation if they're interested. So, um, great. Any other thoughts on these?
May I ask a question about the implementation of these issues?
Of course.
I've actually created them, and for a second one, the customized thing, I've seen that there's currently no for a repository structure passed into the customized package, just the repo URL. And there's no central wrapper function that wraps commands, OS commands that are executed. Again, contrary to Helm, where there is a wrapper function where the proxy is injected in one place. And I was just thinking about injecting it into every command that is created, like in several places across the customers package, or refactoring that and creating a wrapper for commands that are executed. But that would, of course, be a bigger code change. And I'm not sure what is the better way to go.
I haven't worked on this particular piece of the code, so I mean, I think just based on my knowledge of the code base, I'd probably recommend less changes just because I think that you're gonna have better luck getting reviews for that. So the approach with less refactoring, I think just by default would probably be what I would choose at first. But that being said, if anybody's here that has worked on this part of the code base and has a stronger opinion, I mean, ultimately, I think that the bigger refactor might be better again without knowing the specifics, but for the sake of you being able to get this through, I'd probably recommend taking the less invasive approach. Anybody have thoughts there?
I'm just reading through the issue, trying to make ultra sure I understand. So use case one, internal Helm charts, you add a new app that references a GitHub repository that references a private Helm chart that shouldn't go through the proxy, and that access fails. So you would add the no proxy field to the repo creds for the private Helm chart. Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I was talking about the customize issue, second one.
Okay.
But your interpretation for this one is actually right.
Okay, so for the customize one, here proxy settings and the customize. Also pulling the customize code, sure. So when you run customize build, you want these proxy invars to be set so that customize itself can take advantage of the proxy. So right now, the proxy field is available on the repo creds object. It's just going unused by the customize build and other customize commands, right?
I'm not exactly sure whether it's already in the customize package, like if it's passed down or just parts
Sure.
of it, but it is available there, yeah. And if you pass it down, you can just use it.
Okay, so the problem today is that it's unused.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And that causes some issues depending on your special setup.
Sure. Okay. The only thing to be cautious of, just have to make sure that the right repo creds and the right proxy settings get set, i.e., just because a customization.yaml contains a reference to get repo X doesn't necessarily mean that the project that that app is in has access to that repo. And I'm not familiar with that code. I'm sure that checking is already done. Just want to make sure that that's the case as you write the code.
That's actually a good point. Yeah, we've stumbled upon this as well, that you can only use one credential. And I wouldn't care about this. You would just use the proxy that's set on the root or the app repo and use that, or whatever's set there.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah, I follow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, great. Yep. So if there's no comments here, I think we can move on to picking primary and secondary for next week. So first we have volunteers before we go down the list. Okay. Right. So I don't think Jesse is here. Chayton, are you here from Red Hat? May, are you here? John, Jaideep, Edon, Ashutosh, Regina, Akram, and Anand. And I'm looking through. Actually, Akram, are you here?
Yeah, I can do it for next 15.
Great, thank you. Are you primary or secondary?
Can go for secondary.
Secondary. Great, thank you.
You can put myself as primary, Remington.
Okay, great. Thank you, Leo. Appreciate it. I think the problem that we're running into is the people that regularly attend are here.
Correct.
And then people that rarely attend are down here. So maybe we should kind of recycle this. But okay, great. So that's that. And it looks like we have a few discussion items for today. So Maurice, it looks like you have a couple topics. Are you here on the call?
Yeah, hi. Long-time
Yeah.
listener, first-time joiner. Yeah, I have like two things that I wanted to just get a bit of input in. So I thought before I annoy folks with more emails and more comments on PRs, I just drop in here and ask them. Specifically, this one is a change that I'm fairly comfortable that I have already made, but I have no idea how to write the testing. I've looked into finding documentation for how to write tests, but I wasn't successful. I don't know if it doesn't exist or if it's just I didn't find it. So yeah, before I annoy any more people with more pings, I just thought I come in here and ask what good next step could be. Yeah, specifically, this is just a tiny, not tiny, it's a small change that if you try to remove Argo CD RM cluster, the in cluster, it just fails and tells you, hey, you cannot do that, but you can disable it. Because that's an issue I ran into when I tried to do it on my clusters. So I thought I'd implement this, and then I think there's already a test in there if you scroll down. Yeah, I already added a test, but that just fails, and I have no idea why, because I honestly don't understand the whole testing setup, and I did not I didn't read through all of the testing code yet because it's quite complex, and I figured it might be better. My time might be better spent in asking here.
It seems that the library that you're trying to use here is something that we use in E2E tests, and you're trying to execute a unit test. So my suggestion is don't use those account fixture given, don't use this package, but just write a simple unit test. Oh, but this is E2E, sorry.
Yeah, it is E2E. I basically I took inspiration by what's already in that test file or in other E2E tests, but I tried to keep it as close as possible to what already exists there. And yeah,
Right, because your change is basically on a command, right? It's
exactly,
just
yeah. Yeah, I
Mhm.
just want to basically check if I supply this command, then it fails with this. And if if it was really simple, I would just write build the application, run the command, and check that the output is that. But of course, like we have that test library, so I should use it.
Yeah, yeah. So, and what is the problem that you're facing with this specifically?
The problem, let me check it again. The problem is, well, mainly, honestly, that the tests failed and that I have no idea how to find out why they actually fail. And it's been a while. I mainly first wanted to check in if there's any documentation that I have been overlooking, or if that's really just an issue of there is no documentation and I need to dig deeper. The issue specifically was that when I ran the test, it looked like it always returns the same output, and the output is that the user trying to execute the command doesn't have the permission to execute the cluster remove, which is weird because if you check out in the test line 356, I explicitly set that permission, and I think I might be doing that wrong.
Do you get, so I think I know why you're not getting the why the error message isn't appearing. It's because the E2E test helper is calling a low level like command wrapper library within Argo CD that by default doesn't capture standard out. It only captures standard error. So that error message is appearing in a string that is inaccessible to you. Now I see that we do output an error object, but I'm still looking through the code, but I'm not satisfied that that error message actually appears in the error object. I think that is just going to be a generic like exec package. Oh, hey, your command generically failed type message. So you might have to modify the way the test suite works to pass through some flag that says, hey, I want you to actually capture standard out or standard error as well as standard out.
Yeah,
As far as the permission error goes, my guess is you get a permission error because Argo CD attempts to access that cluster and it doesn't exist. So it's just throwing permission denied in order to stay generic. That's just a guess though.
Yeah, I was already thinking about when I wrote this and when I had this issue that it might be due to the in cluster being kind of special. But that looking at STDR might be is a good pointer. I'll look into that. Thank you.
I also see that you've got, so you're setting permissions, resource clusters, delete project name plus /star, line 360. Try setting that to just star instead of project name /star, because I don't think you're interacting with any project scoped clusters here.
Yeah, I don't think I am, no. Good. Yeah, I give that a try and see how it goes. And if I get stuck again, I'll ask again. Thank you.
It's a good feature though. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I ran into this like twice over the course of a year, and I was like, okay, no, I'm not going to do this a third time. I'm going to finally write that code.
Yeah, thank you for implementing this. Right. And then it looked like you had a second one as well. Is that right?
Yeah, the second one is a more general, hey, I would like this feature. It's kind of I'm sure you all heard this like 500 times. We're using multi-source apps basically everywhere, and we had a very long and actually surprisingly very productive discussion in another issue with Michael about like what kinds of features should we build in. And this PR came out of that where somebody was like, okay, let's build this one small feature with Helm set file, which is super helpful in case when you have like tools that you deploy with Helm and then you have a config file that you also want to deploy, because with set file you can then just have that config file in your repository and lint it and parse it as you would normally do. So we really like this feature. And my question basically is not to the content of this, but how's the process usually look when folks have a PR that's open? Because I don't have any insights into that yet. So I'm just curious about, is there like some queue where maintainers look into, or is it just we look at how many upvotes an issue has, and then at some point somebody gets to it? I can imagine that the constraint is basically time that everybody has for looking into issues and looking into PR reviews. And again, as with before, I don't want to bug anyone when it's not necessary. So I just wanted to get a bit of insight into that.
I think probably the best way to get a PR prioritized is what you're already doing, which is bringing it up in this meeting. I think that's one of the positive things about this meeting is that people from the community can bring up a PR that they really want reviewed. As far as like the regular process around PR reviews, I'm not sure if Intuit, maybe you guys have a process around this, but I think it was my understanding that when we started the primary and secondary issue triage, it kind of included PR triage as well. So if there was PRs, then either read them yourself or request from the relevant party to review them as well. I'm not sure if that has been I'm not sure if that was actually the intent or not. I think that it was my understanding that it was, but maybe not. And maybe folks just don't know or forget to review PRs. But yeah, Intuit, do you guys have like a regular cadence for kind of looking through PR backlogs? Or I know at one point that was the case, but
There is a existing proposal, Remington, to really clarify what exactly is expected from the triage. Is a work in progress right now. It's not live, but I guess answering your question, Maurice, you can totally jump in and review the PR, and as Remington said, bringing that to us and bringing attention is it's a really good step to take to have the PR merged. But you can totally review it and try to ping one of the reviewers, one of the Argo City reviewers, to just to double check on your review, and then one of the approvers can hit the merge button, and that's done.
Cool. So yeah, just I checked this out. It looks good so far. So next step would just be
So you
fine.
reviewed already, and there's
I reviewed it already with the context that I have and with the knowledge I have about this specific issue. To me, it looks good, but also then again, I'm not a maintainer, so there might be things I have missed. So definitely needs a review by someone else, and of course an approval by someone who can actually approve it. So yeah, that was mainly like what I also wanted to know about. So because of then.
Are you a user of this feature? Like, are you able also to test in a production instance?
I am able to test this in a production instance. Yes, we have an internal tracking issue at Anaconda that is basically that has like 4 or 5 instances of, hey, when this is released, we can test it. What I can also do is, yeah, so ideally from a user perspective, of course, it gets released and then we update and we can use it. So we can definitely in that case verify that it works as intended, or open a bug if it doesn't. And if it doesn't, I would also definitely look into fixing it. Yeah.
If you can build the image locally, so basically build a new image in your private Docker registry and then test that image, either take the PR and rebuild it on top of the release you're currently running just to test that additional feature with some load, and then comment on the pull request as well. It helps for the review.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do that.
I'll also say for this particular PR, it looks like the author wants it labeled as beta, but in the documentation that they updated, I don't actually see that they've referenced it as beta. So I would just recommend, I won't even leave a comment here, but I would just recommend that they refer to this as a beta feature somehow in the actual documentation and not just in the PR title, just so that's
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah, I'll discuss that with them. I think they mainly wanted to label it like this because they're looking into this for the first time. As they say, they're not a Go programmer, so I'll discuss that with them in the PR and find out what the intention is.
Sounds good. Great. Yeah, well, thank you for bringing these up. Hopefully we answered your questions.
Yep, thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, so it looks like the next topic is from Michael. You have a demo for us.
Yeah, hopefully a not super duper long one, but I'll steal this share if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Something I've been working on, mostly with Zach and with Alex G, is a set of Argo CD features and an additional tool that sits kind of outside of Argo CD, but is still useful with it, is previewing, hydrating or rendering manifests and promoting them. So the basic three components are: one, you've got a tool that presents a preview on a PR when you're trying to make a change. So you see the rendered diff. We saw a similar tool yesterday implemented as a GitHub action at the community meeting. The second tool is basically built-in rendered manifests for Argo CD. So Argo CD does the rendering and pushing to Git for you. And then the final feature is something that does promotions via opening and merging pull requests. So the first two are Argo CD features. The third is something that sits alongside Argo CD. So I'll show you how you configure, and this is all very proof of concept code, but hopefully it gives the idea. This is how what I'm calling source hydrator is configured. So you say, here's the dry source. I've got some Helm manifests here. You say, I want to sync from this branch and this particular path. So you could put multiple apps in a single environment or a single branch. And I've got this optional field called hydrate to that lets you push to a different branch from the one that you actually sync from. And that provides the hook endpoint for some tool to do promotions by merging changes from this branch into this branch. But like I say, this is optional. So if you wanted to just do the rendered manifest pattern, you just said environment/dev, Argo CD would hydrate this and push it to that branch for you. And then it would get synced out from there, just like any other app would. So I've set up 3 applications with this type of configuration. I've got a dev, a test, and a prod, all pointing to 3 different branches. And I've set up a promotion strategy that is pretty simple. It says our dry manifests are located on the master branch, and we will be promoting those changes to these 3 branches in this order. And I said, go ahead and auto merge dev. Generally, we'd want to always auto merge, auto promote these changes and gate it on checks. But I've set auto merge to false just to slow things down so we can watch it happen. If I set true here, the promoter would be watching for commit statuses to show that the previous app is healthy. So dev is healthy before test gets merged, test is healthy before prod gets merged. It's all a little bit abstract right here, but I'll show you and hopefully it'll make sense. So if I go to the repository where these manifests are stored and I go to the Helm guestbook repo, I can just make a change. So all of my apps are pulling from this one directory. And I can make a change that will affect all the applications by just taking a tag down to a previous revision. So I'll create this pull request. And like I say, it's POC code. So I've got this running in a 10-second loop. But within 10 seconds, I should get a comment telling me that, basically giving me a diff of all the changes that I've made. So I get the hydrated diff, and it tells me dev, test, and prod are all affected. This is what the change looks like. I think over time, this diff experience will change. We'll add more context. Maybe we'll just link out to a GitHub diff. But at least here, we get the basic idea, and we know that this is all that's being affected. So change looks good. I merged the pull request, and I'm going to pop back over here and just refresh these apps. Right now, I've got it where I have to manually refresh the app in order to trigger the hydration. And it says that it's running the hydrator, and hopefully in a few moments it'll succeed. So that just pushed the changes to the next branch for dev, test, and prod. So I should see that there's a new commit here, which, let's see. Yeah, new commit just now. The next step is our promoter tool is going to recognize that there's been a change pushed to the master branch and to the next branches by the hydrator, and it's going to give me the opportunity to promote those if I want. So the first pull request was to dev, and since I've set auto merge and there's no prerequisite environment, that was automatically merged. And all this text is generated for me, tells me what dry SHA I'm going from and to. And if I look here, I'll see I've got a README automatically generated to tell me how to do the hydration locally. And I've got a couple metadata files for machine consumption if we want something to take some action based on hydration. But of course, the piece I care about is here. My flat manifest.yaml has changed. So that got merged automatically. I'm going to pop back over here and just refresh this app. Since it's auto sync, it's going to go ahead and revert to that previous revision, and it'll be progressing for a few seconds. I've got a super short progress deadline, so sometimes it goes degraded before the new pod comes up, but now it's healthy. So if I go back over to my pull requests and refresh the page real quick, I have a tool that is automatically watching the health of the dev app and updating a commit status on this pull request. So you may have seen it went to X and now it's gone to check mark. This is what prevents the promoter tool from automatically merging this pull request, is dev has to be healthy before we go to test. And normally this would be auto merged, but like I said, I've got it set to manual right now. So to give you a peek behind the curtain, what's happening behind the scenes is this proposed commit resource is monitoring the test next and the test branches. And that's all written out here. We've got the active branches test. The branch for the proposed change is called test next. And when it sees that there's a difference, it opens a pull request object. And it's just plain old Kubernetes object. One nice thing about that is that I can merge this from the Argo CD UI just by doing an action on the pull request object. So now that got merged, and now we're left with just promoting to prod. So let's go look at the test app, give it a refresh. This is going to take a few seconds to become healthy, and then we should see a green check mark beside prod. There it is. And again, I can pop over here and merge it from the Argo CD point of view. So that's a very, very basic example. The nice thing about these commit statuses is the promoter doesn't really care who is populating this. I've written like a 200-line script that monitors my Argo CD apps and just creates a commit status for each one. And then the promoter does the rest of the work. But it could be anybody, any tool publishing its opinion about the promotion worthiness of a given commit. For example,
Thank you.
Sorry. Zach, you're off mute.
Sorry.
You're good, dude. So anything could publish its opinion. At Intuit, we'd want to have like a feature freeze commit status to prevent going to prod during a feature freeze, like during tax season. So that's the tooling. The code is all available to look at, but it's all very proof of concept level right now. What I'm most curious about is folks' opinions on the concepts and whether this would be a useful tool for you. So throwing it to the room for questions.
So basically the promotion strategy resource and proposed commit resources, these are what you're saying lives alongside Argo CD. This is, I'm assuming, like an Arbitrage Labs thing. And then this is orchestrating the changes across the different applications, and it lives in its own application. Is that right?
Correct. So the code right now lives in Zach's org, but we should move it to Arbitrage Labs. I think the code's ready to actually live there. But yeah, that project handles promotion strategy, proposed commit, pull request, and you don't see it here, but there's a fourth CRD called commit status that represents that little green check mark in GitHub. This tool is completely unaware of the existence of Argo CD. The only thing that informs it of anything that Argo CD cares about is these branches, which Argo CD is in charge of pushing to this hyphen next. And this commit status, which my little script is in charge of publishing based on Argo CD health information. Besides these points of contact, which are just basically GitHub, this tool doesn't know that Argo CD is a thing.
Okay. And then you mentioned that basically with this, Argo CD now has the ability to do rendered manifests push directly to Git itself. And this is, I'm assuming, just a feature that's in main or being worked on, etc.
Correct. The feature of rendering manifests is completely, well, it's separate in the sense that the code is completely separate. It's in Argo CD. It's connected in the sense that implementing this feature enables us to use that promotion tool. But this is kind of a standalone feature alongside the preview feature.
Got it. Cool.
Let's see, I'm going to run through chat real quick. So Dan says, suggest allowing the other sources to be their own repos. Sure. So
Well,
pull
talk
from one
about this.
repo, push to a different one?
Yeah. Yeah. If you just wanted to have separation of repositories, a lot of times people will have different permission structures on those and like for different environments, and maybe they don't want to use code owners, or maybe it's different teams working on different environments, different repos.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's nothing inherent here preventing that from working. Let's see, let me think about that for a second. It would be tricky with the promoter because the promoter needs to know something about the dry source in order to tell like what order to push commits in. But as far as just the hydrator tool goes, that should be a fine addition for a future.
We would just have
feature.
to add the
Or
metadata.
pushing those, yeah, pushing to anything really. Let's see, would like an option to render to directories. Technically you could, Dan. You could, so right now we have it, oh, my internet connection's unstable. Okay. Right now we have it pushing to a different branch in its own directory within that branch. You could probably push it. There's a path, yeah. So that lets us push multiple apps to the same branch. And Argo CD, the way I've written the code, it groups everything up. So it only pushes one commit, even if you're pushing multiple applications to different paths.
Okay.
And let's see, should hydration finish trigger sync? Yes, right now I don't have it automatically requesting like a refresh and a sync, but I think that that's a reasonable thing to have. Like you push the hydrated manifest and then you say, okay, now I want you to sync.
So one other question I had for you, Michael, as you were talking about how this works, you said Argo is essentially unaware. So when we had initially talked about this, you thought that we were going to need to modify Argo CD itself. It sounds like you didn't do any changes to Argo CD by itself. Well, I guess the plugin essentially to display it.
So the two things you have to add to Argo CD are, well, first you have to add the push ability, hydrate and push. The second thing is the preview feature, but that's kind of its own thing. That's not really related to promotion besides user experience. You could just use the GitHub action we saw yesterday or whatever to do the preview. That's just a nice addition, which is easier to implement thanks to this feature. And then the promoter is kind of separate.
Okay.
But
You also
could,
have the commit status controller that is kind of separate as well.
and you could make all of what I've just demoed work without the Argo CD feature just by writing like GitHub actions that realize that a new dry commit has been pushed to master, render it and push to environment/next. And then the promoter would see that, pick it up and run with it. Having Argo CD do the hydration is just a convenience thing.
Well, yeah, then it's predictable, so that you always get hydrated the same way. Interesting.
Correct. Yep. I saw a hand go up. Was it Maurice or someone else?
Yeah, that was mine, but you already answered the question.
Okay, cool. Any other questions? Cool. So my short-term hope with this is to convince folks that the additional code maintenance burden is worth it for both the feature, the preview and the hydration features. So I've got a proposal up for the source hydrator. I need to update it now that we've written some POC code to reflect new learnings. But this is a change in Argo CD's security model. It'll now have access to push secrets. It's a significant addition to the code base. So I want to convince folks that this is really sweet and really cool, so that hopefully we think it's worth it to actually merge this. And I'll be pushing for that proposal a bit more over the next coming weeks, now that we have something to actually look at and talk about. And Maurice, I see your hand went up.
I can say from a user perspective, this is something that so I'm part of our platform team, so we maintain all the infrastructure, Kubernetes clusters, whatever. And our engineering teams that actually build products have been asking for something like this more and more. And we've looked into different solutions. And the one thing that I noticed was like, there's no real option to do this like inside of Argo itself. And seeing this is like, makes me really happy, because it's the first steps that you just showed look exactly like the basis of what we've been looking for.
Sweet. I think that'll be the case with a lot of folks. So it'll just be a matter of deciding as a maintenance team whether we feel like this is something that we can, present and maintain in an ongoing way. Because we wouldn't want to get folks excited and then realize, oh, we can't maintain this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that struggle.
Cool. That's all I got.
Nice. Thanks, Michael. That was really cool. Yeah, well, unless anybody has some very quick last-minute topics, we're rushing up against the end of time here. So, yeah, if no one has anything, then yeah, see you next week. Great. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.